We have some very qualified women here, and I know it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful performance. Thank you for making time for us on Saturday. Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Andrea Clark, and I want to tell you about the first piece that we're going to play, which is the Sicilian by Gabriele Fauré, which was composed in 1893. It was originally an orchestral piece written for a theatrical production that was ultimately abandoned. And then a few years later, Fauré arranged this music as a work for cello and piano, and in the same year, 1898, incorporated it into his incidental music for the play Peleus and Melisande in an orchestration for theater orchestra. And it took its final form as part of a suite arranged for full orchestra by Fauré, published in 1909. So this is the Sicilian by Gabriele Fauré.
All right, I'm Paula, and I'm going to talk about the next piece that we do. It's a modern piece, and I've got $5. It says none of you have ever heard of this composer. His name is Jeff Manoukian. Anybody? Okay, good. He was a composer in residence at Brigham Young University in Salt Lake City for many years, and he also did a lot of work with orchestras in Argentina and a couple other places in Latin America. He was born in 1953, but he tragically died in 2021 of lymphatic cancer. He was primarily a pianist, but he did a lot of composition, and I believe he also taught composition at BYU. So this is a real interesting piece. It's a whole set of short pieces. It's not really a sonata form type where the pieces are all related by key or thematic material. They're all just kind of little independent pieces, and they're very tricky. So we're playing two of the easier ones, so maybe next time you'll get some more of them. The first one is called Languido, which means languid. We'll try to be as languid as we can without putting us all to sleep. And then the second one is Energico, which is energetic. And we'll try to wake you up with that one. All right, so I'm going to talk to you about this. Andrea's got one of these too. This is an alto flute. It's pitched, sorry about the mic, it's pitched a fourth below the regular C flute that you see us all playing. And it's a lot of fun. Mine's been damaged there, so the plating is worn off and there's brass under that because it was a cheap flute. But somebody dropped it before I bought it and damaged that. But it's a lot of fun. It's just like a car. These are just like cars. I compare these to cars all the time, especially for my students' parents who might not want to spend money on a better instrument. So we all have different makes of cars, and we all have different makes of flutes. So I play a flute that was built for me by a guy named Tom Green, and it has a Brannon head on it. Gayle plays a Powell, right? Yeah. Andrea plays a Powell with
No, it's an Almeida with an Arista head.
Okay, it's an Almeida with an Arista head joint. I used to have an Arista head joint on my flute. And your new flute is what? Muromatsu, made in Japan for many, many years. So it's just like buying a car. You can buy the same basic body, but you can have it pitched differently. You can have different keys and gadgets and gizmos. You can have different tubing thickness. And just like your car, all of that's going to affect performance and gas mileage. I like cars. I'm sort of a little gearhead. But so you know how it is when you buy a car. You could drive one out back, and it feels a certain way, and then you drive the next one on the lot, and it feels different. Flutes are like that too. It's very individual. All instruments are. It's a very individual thing. So this is a Jupiter. It's kind of they're made in China, and they're kind of a student grade flute, but it plays easy and it's pretty much in tune, and why not? So it's heavy. Yeah, it's kind of a beast. It takes more air to blow. It's just like a big truck takes, you get 17 miles to the gallon, and some of us get 40.
There's even bigger low flutes.
Right. So this is an alto. There's a C flute. There's a littler one. It's about this big. That's called an E-flat flute. Gayle has one of those. They're kind of a different animal. We all play Piccolo, which is tiny, and that sounds an octave above C flute. So this is a fourth below flute. Then there's a bass flute that's an octave below. There's contrabasses that go 2 and 3 octaves below, and some of those have the one I played many years ago had 9 feet of tubing, and it was almost 2 inches in diameter, the tubing.
And
So,
sits on.
yeah, it's a stand. You can't hold it. It stands up.
Oh my goodness.
And you can't hold them. They're heavy.
Yeah.
And they're expensive. So anyway. Well, the next piece we're going to play, I have my notes with me, but I bet you have all heard of Scott Joplin, right?
Yeah.
He was born in Texarkana, and he moved around. He was in St. Louis for a couple of years. He died in New York City, very tragically, very young. And, we all think of him as the ragtime guy, but he didn't actually write that many. He wrote about 40 that we know of. He also wrote a couple of operas, and the first one that he wrote, and I've got the name on my sheet, but I'm blanking right now. No, that was the second one. He was destitute, and he sold all of his belongings and faced eviction at one point, and the manuscript of that first opera was sold and lost at that point, so we don't know how it went. The second one is Treemonisha, and that one is beginning to get some airtime again. People are beginning to perform it again. I was in a group this last summer that played the overture to that, and it's a story about a slave girl who was abused and then won her freedom. She was abused for learning to read, actually, isn't that tragic? And she was accused of being a witch because she could actually read. And it wasn't thought that young black women could read at that point. So we've come a little ways from that, but of course there are still many injustices. But the piece we're going to play for you today is one of his most popular rags. It's called Easy Winners, right? Okay. I don't have my notes. I picked this up instead of my notes, so now I'm just trying to remember everything. But anyway, it's a lot of fun. The alto flute adds a little bit of bass to it, and you'll hear that. And we've had fun working on this for you.
Hello. Our next piece is Lyric Poem by George Mackay. And George Mackay was a composer who he was born in 1899, and he spent his life on the West Coast. He worked at University of Washington, Seattle for a while, and he had lots of visiting professorships at area universities. His music is largely influenced by American folk songs. He heard a lot of Civil War folk songs from his grandparents, and also influenced by the Northwestern Native American music that he heard in that area also. So this is George Mackay, Lyric Poem.
you boomer type people, what single was on the flip side of Yellow Submarine by the Beatles? Who knows? Somebody knows. What? It was. Oh, okay. It was Eleanor Rigsby. So Eleanor Rigsby was on the 1966 album Revolver, which was still kind of considered sort of early to mid-Beatles. It was written by Lennon and McCartney, although John Lennon claimed owner, like he did more of it, but that was disputed by those who heard Paul McCartney playing bits and pieces of it months and years before that on the piano. So it's actually generally considered that Paul McCartney wrote it. Who knows what's unusual about this piece, about this song? It's one of my favorites. I love the Beatles. Oh. None of the Beatles played, they just sang. Yeah, so the instrumental was a string octet. It was not a double quartet. There were actually 8 string parts that were written by this. I think George Martin, who was their producer, had a lot to do with that orchestration of that. But if you have access to Sirius, which is the satellite radio thing, the Symphony Hall on there had a series recently about classical influence in the Beatles, and that was really wonderfully interesting. So if you go on Symphony Hall on your website and look up Beatles, you'll come up with some of that stuff. Originally, McCartney did not name his little lady Eleanor Rigby. He named her Miss Daisy Hawkins. Aren't we all so glad he changed it, right? It would be too many S's, I think, for the recording. Miss Daisy Hawkins. So I thought they did that. Oh, it's all on Wikipedia. Go look at Wikipedia, it's really good. It's also written in modes, which the main mode in this one is Aeolian mode, which is like a natural minor scale. So there you go. And the other mode that's used a lot is Dorian, which is like a natural minor with a raised 6. So if you know any theory, there you go. That's really about all I have on that. So I just thought it was fascinating. I love all that stuff. The Beatles were brilliant, in my opinion, and that they could pull in classical influences and stuff and really still make these songs that we love 50 years later is a cool thing.
going back in time a little bit to the classical period. This is a three-movement piece, Notturno, by Karl Ditters von Dittersdorf, who was an Austrian composer, violinist, and he was also apparently a conservationist, like going out in the woods and getting back to nature, I guess. And he was friends with both Haydn and Mozart and very much influenced by their styles. He composed many pieces of chamber music, including the Notturno, which is in three movements, Adagio, Minuetto, and Fugue. So that's our next piece, and hope you enjoy it. Not too Adagio. Yeah.
I was joking with them all yesterday that the next piece needs no introduction, so I really didn't need to talk about it. But it really doesn't. It's one of the best known songs, maybe in the world, definitely in America. It was written for the 1939 movie Wizard of Oz, sung by Judy Garland, by Harold Arlen, Over the Rainbow.
your daughter